Welcome back to another Brian Reads the News segment. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Yardbarker.com article titled "Which 25 Rock Albums Have Sold the Most Copies All Time?" There are various ways to rate the best-selling rock albums of all time. In this case, we went directly to the source, the Recording Industry Association of America. In terms of what constitutes a rock album, we went with the consensus and inclusion of subgenres of the rock category, such as hard rock, heavy metal, pop rock, soft rock, and folk rock. With all that in mind, here are the 25 best. First album they're talking about is Simon and Garfunkel's greatest hit, Simon and Garfunkel 1972, with 14 million certified units. To be clear, Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel released several greatest hits to celebrate their time as legendary pop-folk rock duo, yet the first of such records is everything longtime fans or newcomers to the pair need to cherish: the musical dynamic between the two talents. While it never gets old hearing the true classics like Mrs. Robinson, The Boxer, and Bridge Over Troubled Waters, we shouldn't forget about underrated gems such as I Am a Rock, Cecilia, and Kathy's Song. It reached number 2 on the Billboard 200 in the United States. Next on the list is Bad Outta Hell by Meatloaf, which was released in 1977 and sold 14 million copies. Another 14 times platinum selling album, and it's one of the great debut records of all time. While the late Meatloaf was a true showman with a near operatic voice, Bad Out of Hell featured an all-star roster of celebrated musicians. A late songwriter, Jim Steinman, who also wrote songs for Air Supply and Bonnie Tyler, penned every track on the record. Meanwhile, fellow legend Todd Rundgren produced the record. E Street Band drummer Max Weinberg and pianist Roy Batin contributed to an album featuring classic rock gems like the title cut, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, and 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad. Next on the list is Tapestry by Carole King, which was released in 1971 and sold 14 million copies. It's the album that proved a woman could be a strong songwriter, a rather powerful soft rock record. It set the stage for many renowned female artists like Barbra Streisand and Tori Amos. Even Taylor Swift gushed over her during King's Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Tapestry won 4 Grammys, including Album of the Year, Song of the Year, You've Got a Friend, and Record of the Year, It's Too Late. It also includes timeless classics like I Feel the Earth Move, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, and Will You Love Me Tomorrow. Tapestry is estimated to have sold roughly 30 million copies. Next on the list is The Beatles 1962 to 1966. Titled The Beatles, released in 1973, the album sold 15 million copies. Otherwise known as the Red Album, this is a record of original Beatles work, all written and composed by John Lennon and Paul McCartney, like Love Me Do, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Can't Buy Me Love, and Yesterday. Music fans who still have not discovered this stellar collection of Beatles classics will not hear any of the band's many popular covers of the time. It was released with a companion Greatest Hits album and later tracks, which we'll get to in a bit. Both earned renewed popularity when reissued in 1993 in compact disc form. Next on the list is the Greatest Hits 1974 to 1978 Steve Miller Band. Released in 1978, the album sold 15 million copies. Released in the late 1970s, there are still factions of high schoolers listening to this collection of Steve Miller's best. Interestingly enough, only songs from 3 albums, The Joker, Fly Like an Eagle, and Book of Dreams, to that point appear on this particular release, with popular tunes like The Joker, Jungle Love, and Take the Money and Run. This greatest hits package has truly stood the test of time and introduced countless ears to the often underrated talent of Miller and his buddies. Next album on the list is The Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. Released in 1973, this album sold 15 million copies. The overall innovation of this listening experience resulted in Pink Floyd becoming an international commercial success following years of being a quality but still somewhat obscure acid progressive rock band. The flow of the music transitioning smoothly from one song to another, making it truly special, not to mention the production. Alan Parsons earned a Grammy Award for his engineering work, value that has perhaps the most influential part of the album. Songs like Time, Money, and Brain Damage Eclipse are all examples of the behind-the-scenes genius of a record that spent a total of 957 weeks on the Billboard charts. Next on the list is The Greatest Hits by Journey. Released in 1998, this album sold 15 million copies. Everything a fan of this arena rock outfit can want is all in one place. Sure, there remain issues within the current makeup of the band, and Steve Perry will likely never perform with the band, but the musical magic is still alive and well, no matter who's singing or getting along. Don't Stop Believing has blossomed into a rock anthem, while Open Arms is a ballad that still might be played during school dances throughout the United States. In addition, this package includes old school Journey classics like Lights, Wheel in the Sky, Any Way You Want, and Lovin', Touchin', and Squeezin'. Next on the list is Metallica's self-titled album, Metallica. Released in 1991, this album sold 16 million copies. Also known as the Black Album, the record broke Metallica to the mainstream masses and officially set them apart from the rest of the heavy thrash metal heap. Impeccably produced and polished by the famed Bob Rock, the band's fifth album produced 6 singles led by Enter Sandman, Where I May Roam, and even a ballad in Nothing Else Matters that blew up on radio and MTV. Though a good chunk of Metallica's old-school diehards felt the band sold out, the record debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 and spent 4 weeks in that spot. It was the 4th album in U.S. history to chart for at least 550 weeks. Next on the list is Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin. Released in 1975, the album sold 16 million copies. Led Zeppelin's 6th studio release is also a double album, and it won't be the last time we hear from the band on the list. Just listen and it's understandably why many Led Zeppelin fans think Physical Graffiti is the best of the band's best. Trampled Underfoot, Cashmere, Custard Pie, In My Time of Dying, and the Wonton Song might be some of the most recognizable tunes from Physical Graffiti, but tracks like the eerily emotional 10 Years Gone and whimsical Down by the Seaside make it a thoroughly special record. Next on the list is Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. Released in 1992, this album sold 16 million copies. Alanis Morissette went from Canadian pop sensation singing and dancing in shopping malls to the driving force in 90s female angst. Morissette's first album to be released internationally, Jagged Little Pill, introduced her to American audiences and she became an MTV staple. Morissette wrote all the lyrics while she and lauded songwriter-producer Glenn Ballard composed the music together. Her signature You Oughta Know with Dave Navarro on guitar and Flea on bass, and the campy Ironic were top 10 hits in Billboard's Hot 100, while the album produced 6 total singles and sold more than 33 million worldwide. Next on the list are the Beatles, 1967 and 1970. The Beatles released in 1973. The album sold 17 million copies. We previously mentioned the counterpart release to the Red Album, well, here it is, aka the Blue Album, and in addition to the Beatles' hits from Magical Mystery Tour and Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, penned by Lennon and McCartney, the Blue Album includes music from George Harrison, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and Octopus's Garden by Ringo Starr. Unlike its companion record, this album reached number 1 on the Billboard Top LP and Tape chart in the United States. In the end, it's usually a matter of preference among Beatles fans as to which collection is better, so why not celebrate both? Up next on the list is Greatest Hits by Elton John. Released in 1974, this album sold 17 million copies. Among all the greatness that Elton John and longtime working partner Bernie Taupin have produced, this still rates as the legendary entertainer's best-selling record in the US. It's also another collection of classic rock songs that seems that should be owned by anybody who is a fan of Sir Elton or pop traditional rock in general. The 10-song album covers John's and Taupin's work from 1970 to 75, featuring legendary tracks like Your Song, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and Benny and the Jets. Unfortunately, the record is out of print, but John has released several other greatest hits packages in the following years. Next on the list is Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen. Released in 1984, this album sold 17 million copies. Though 1975's Born to Run made the boss an established rock star, Born in the USA is his most iconic album, solidifying his place among the true entertainment giants of his time, and all time for that matter. From the 7 top 10 singles to the memorable cover art, Born in the USA is an unforgettable piece of work, even though many still get the this is not a flag-waving patriotic release. The pop-fueled, MTV-friendly Dancing in the Dark sold Springsteen to the mainstream masses, while deeper cuts like No Surrender, Working on the Highway, and Bobby Jean take fans back to his rugged early years. Next on the list is Boston, self-titled release Boston. Released in 1976, this album sold 17 million copies. At the time, Boston's self-titled first release was the best-selling debut album ever. However, it was quite the journey just to get interested in making the innovative and bombastic project, which was the brainchild of MIT student-turned-rocker Tom Schultz and aided by late Boston voice Brad Delp. Thanks to memorable guitar-driven hits, More Than a Feeling, Peace of Mind, and Foreplay Long Time, the album is estimated to have sold more than 20 million internationally, thanks to those songs that remain staples of classic rock radio on the traditional formats and satellite arena. Next on the list is Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. Released in 1987, this album sold 18 million copies. Back in the summer of 1987, hair glam metal was filling FM radios and days and nights on MTV. Then came this deliciously raunchy, dirty, raw debut from a band of misfits ready to take over the hard rock world by blowing the doors off the mainstream music scene. Complete with Axl Rose's snarling and searing vocals, Slash's master moments on the Les Paul, and favorites Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child O' Mine, and Paradise City, Appetite for Destruction reached number 1 on the Billboard 200. It's a hard-charging, emotional music journey from start to finish that is still as intense today as it was over 35 years ago. Up next on the list is Rumors by Fleetwood Mac. Released in 1977, this album sold 20 million copies. By the time Rumors came out, Fleetwood Mac was a much different sounding and looking band than its early days of the 1960s. Back then, it was a guitar-driven, blues-fueled outfit that never seemed to achieve its just credit. So it was the band's 11th album and second with Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks in tow that sent Fleetwood Mac toward mainstream rock superstardom. The demise of that rock power couple's relationship provided some emotionally charged classics such as Go Your Own Way and The Chain. Rumors won a Grammy and remains one of the most celebrated and influential rock records of all time. Next on the list is Cracked Rear View by Hootie and the Blowfish. Released in 1994, this album sold 21 million copies. Is Hootie alternative rock, or purveyors of straight-up rock and roll meant to be played in a bar while drinking with your buddies? Regardless, the band knocked it out of the park with Cracked Rear View. Hootie and the Blowfish's debut sat atop the Billboard 200 on 5 occasions, thanks to top 10 singles Hold My Hand, I Only Want to Be With You, and Let Her Cry. In the grand scheme of things, the band could never truly duplicate its success with Cracked Rear View, but this album remains a special part of 1990s pop culture. Next on the list is The Wall by Pink Floyd. Released in 1979, this album sold 23 million copies. Pink Floyd had long been considered a progressive and conceptual rock band, but this album was especially bombastic and grandiose regarding production, content, and animosity within the process. This semi-autobiographical work of bassist Roger Waters alerted listeners that we don't need no education while dealing with personal loss and the growing disdain for rock stardom to the point of reinventing oneself. The Wall houses Floyd classics like Comfortably Numb, Run Like Hell, and Hey You, not to mention underrated gems like Mother and Nobody Home. A fellow British musician Bob Geldof played the lead role in the movie version. Next on the list is The Greatest Hits Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Billy Joel. Released in 1985, this album sold 23 million copies. The Piano Man's Best from 1973 to 85. It truly is the definitive collection of Joel classics and an ideal place for new listeners to be introduced to one of the great singer-songwriters of all time. In addition to standout Joel favorites like Only the Good Die Young, She Always a Woman, Life, Uptown Girl, the album includes 2 previously unreleased tracks, You're Only Human, Second Wind, and The Night Is Still Young. It came out in the mid-1980s when Joel was reaching a new generation of fans who have since passed down his music to the next one. Up next is the Beatles' self-titled album, Beatles, released in 1968. This album sold 24 million copies. Nope, we're not done with the Beatles. The White Album is a hodgepodge of musical stylings and genres, folk, ska, avant-garde, to name a few. It wasn't an easy album for the band to make, and its breakup would soon follow. However, there is plenty of greatness to be found in this legendary double album. Blackbird, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Back in the USSR, Oobla-Dee, Oobla-Da, Dear Prudence, Helter Skelter, Revolution 1 and 9, and those just dent the surface. The White Album is not for everybody, and plenty of diehard Beatles fans can't fully stomach the project, yet it didn't dim the Fab Four's legacy. Next on the list is Led Zeppelin 4, released in 1971. This album sold 24 million copies. Technically, Led Zeppelin's celebrated 4th album is untitled but has traditionally been referred to as Led Zeppelin 4. Worldwide, it's the band's best-selling album with more than an estimated 37 million copies sold. The record consists of 8 songs, and arguably all but one, no offense to Four Sticks, are among the band's undisputed classics. Black Dog is one of the best album openers ever, and Rock and Roll keeps the fun going. Misty Mountain Hop kicks off side 2, while the epic When the Levee Breaks brings it all home with force. Of course, Led Zeppelin 4 is also where we find the band's most recognizable song in Stairway to Heaven. Next on the list is Back in Black by AC/DC. Released in 1980, this album sold 25 million copies. Following the death of Bon Scott and with a new cigarette-stained voice singer Brian Johnson in tow, AC/DC delivered one of the all-time records amid serious adversity. A tribute to Scott, the record featured a more mature AC/DC sound than to the brilliant production of Robert Mutt Lang, but was still an unabashed celebration of the way Scott would have wanted things to go. The title track, Hell's Bells, Shoot to Thrill, and rollicking You Shook Me All Night Long are just a few of the highlights from the album that is the epitome of all killer, no filler. Next on the list is Hotel California, released by the Eagles in 1975. This album sold 26 million copies. Hotel California is more than just the legendary title track. It's arguably the Eagles' most celebrated studio album and was nominated for an Album of the Year Grammy, which it lost to the aforementioned Rumors. However, New Kid in Town won the same award for Best Arrangement of Voices, and the title track took home the Record of the Year Grammy. Not to mention, Life in the Fast Lane included a major contribution from Walsh, who made his Eagles debut on the album, and The Last Resort is one of the band's most underrated tracks. The Hotel California album went on to number 1 in 7 different countries. Next on the list is Thriller by Michael Jackson, released in 1982. This album sold 34 million copies. When it comes to international album sales, Thriller reigns supreme with an estimated 70 million copies sold. In the US, it remains number 2, but still, from start to finish, it is one of the greatest pop rock records ever released. It arrived when pop radio was still relevant and MTV was about to explode. With classics like Billie Jean, Beat It, and The Title Cut, Jackson showed that a successful pop song could be even more popular with the right music video. Michael Jackson was a special entertainer well before he released Thriller. However, none of his 4 previous solo records were released during the MTV era, so this essentially turned him into a worldwide phenom and icon. Finally, the last album on the list is Their Greatest Hits by the Eagles. Released in 1976, this album sold 38 million copies. Yes, that's right. When it comes to album sales in the United States, this Eagles collection of favorites and timeless classics remains number 1. Spanning the Eagles' first 4 studio albums, it was the first to receive platinum status by the RIAA. The record also spent more than 230 weeks on the Billboard 200 thanks to gems like Take It Easy, Already Gone, Desperado, and One of These Nights. Its overall success can partially be credited to the Eagles' overall crossover appeal, spanning the rock and country genres. Those tunes are still played on the traditional radio stations to this day. Alright, though, there you have it, another successful Brian Reads the News segment. This one brought to us by yardbarker.com. You can go up to the website yardbarker.com if you want to check this one out in more detail. Again, it's titled, Which 25 Rock Albums Have Sold the Most Copies of All Time? If you like this sort of article, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Give this one a like and go on up there and subscribe. Here's a look at my channel. Real easy to find. It's just my name, Brian Kingsbury. We're currently sitting at 1.11 thousand subscribers with 4.5 thousand videos. So there's plenty for you to watch up there. There's a lot of these types of videos as well as live music. You can go on up there, check everything out, watch a few videos, hit that subscription button, and then ring that notification bell. When you ring the bell, that way you'll be notified every time a new video drops. Do me a big favor, give this one a big thumbs up, hit that thumbs up button to like this video and get it in front of a few more eyes. That's kind of the goal of all this. Thank you for watching this one to the very end. Again, I'm Brian Kingsbury. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.